so I'm sitting here with Bethany. She is a client of mine, and we've known each other, man, what, a little over 2 years now?
2 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Almost 3 years.
Almost 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, so time flies, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so I first met Bethany a few years ago, somewhere in there, and she has a dog named Temujin. Tim is what I call him. And I want her to tell us what made you get Tim. What was your original reason for getting him? And let's go from there.
So I worked on a sheep farm out in Lebanon, and I wanted to get a puppy to train to run the sheep. And luckily they had like a litter, so I got a litter of the farm dog puppies.
Yeah.
And it was then we lost our sheep ranch, and so we had to adjust to different life in the city instead of out on the farm.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was challenging.
and so you originally get them to work sheep,
Mm-hmm.
and then your life radically goes the other direction.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so when you first got him to do that, how was he at that?
How was he at running sheep?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he was really good at it. Like, very intuitive. He could push sheep really well. He was a puppy, so he was like still really nervous about it.
Mm-hmm.
But his granddad was a good sheeper, so.
Yeah. And did you find Tim early on was very determined, or?
Oh God, yeah, always very determined.
Very determined, yeah. And so you got him. It looked like, hey, this is a great dog. It's really seeming like he's gonna do well with the sheep. Already seeing early signs of that.
Yeah, he was good with sheep. He was great with people. Like, loved people. He loved the farm dogs that we had down there too. So he seemed to be like a great all-around dog. Yeah.
Yeah. And then once you switched up the environment, what did you start to experience then?
So we changed over. He was just a couple months old actually when we switched over. But he would, like, when he'd see other dogs, so like before he was super friendly, but when he would see other dogs on the street, he would just launch himself at them and start like tearing up grass, biting the leash, like digging the grass and tearing it, like looking at the other dog. It was kind of like, oh God, I haven't seen this before.
Seen that.
Yeah. And then when I'd try to like step in and say, hey, calm down, correct him or whatever I'd try to do, at that time, I think he was like he was still young, so I was trying to do just positive reinforcement, which is what I've been told. He would just bite me. He would turn around and he'd bite my leg. He would bite my hand. I've got like a bunch of marks all over.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised because he was so sweet.
On the farm.
Yeah, it was just very calm.
It was like a complete 180. Is what it sounds like.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you see this right away, or was it kind of like progress into that?
I think as he got older, it got worse.
Yeah. So like right when you moved, did you see it right when you moved, or did it start to shift into that as he got older?
I think it started to shift as he got older. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to tell if it was the environment or just him getting older
and the new switch up of things and how you're now going about it versus on the farm.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of variables.
Right.
Is what you felt like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he started doing these things when he'd see other dogs.
Yeah.
And then what else were you experiencing? Anything else?
Well, we had a problem when we got a cat. Mm-hmm. So on the farm, like, there were tons of cats, and he got along really well with cats, chickens, all that. Mm-hmm. But we got a new cat, and he would, at first he would just bark at it, and then he went to full on trying to chase it, trying to attack it, and then he'd be doing the same thing with the cat when he'd see like other dogs. So he'd start like tearing the carpet, like biting anything that he could see. If you went to try to calm him down, he would bite you.
And was this if he was being held back on leash or like confined?
Yes, it was only if he was confined. If he could chase the cat.
Chase it, he'd just chase it. He wasn't well, I see the cat, let me rip up some stuff.
Yeah, no.
If he could go, he could go.
Yeah.
It's just that if he couldn't, then he would put his energy into these type of things.
Yeah, get really frustrated.
Yeah. And so then you said you started with the positive reinforcement stuff, yes? Mm-hmm. And then I know before me, if I remember correctly, you at least worked with one other trainer, right?
I had four other trainers that I was
and
went to.
So how did that progression go? Like, you don't need to get into too much of the details of, like, definitely not who they are, but more of just like, I started with this person and this is kind of their philosophy and this is kind of what I was told, and then so on and so forth.
So I think the first two people were mostly positive trainers, trick trainers, and that sort of stuff. And they would say, and the reason I went with that is because they said, oh, he's too young for discipline. Like, you shouldn't be disciplining him. He won't understand it. He's too little. Which I guess he was like 8 or 9 months. So at that point.
The person you got in contact with was, just so I'm clear, is they said, hey, you definitely don't want to be disciplining him,
right?
Because he's young,
right?
Did they have a view of later on you discipline, or was their perspective that you should never have discipline? You should just use the positive reinforcement.
They kept saying that you don't need to, not that you shouldn't, but they're like, if you do positive right, you won't need to
discipline.
Won't need to discipline.
Yeah. And so, what was their strategy for these issues that you started to have?
Well, they would first of all try to redirect with food, but I think he was so anxious at that point that he wasn't taking food. Like, he wouldn't eat pretty regularly because he was always anxious. And then they're like, all right, well, what about games like, tug and throwing the ball and frisbee and all of that? And I was like, oh, we can do that. And so we did that every day, like, constantly.
Yeah. and was
it was really bad.
So this was to, like, try to give him a job, or give him, like, something to redirect into, instead of chasing the cat, chase the frisbee. Was this the thing?
It was like redirecting, and then when he sees the cat, you bring out a toy
instead of chase this. Let's play with the toy.
Let's play with the toy, so that he, like, redirects onto you, and that was kind of the method that they.
And what was the outcome of this? Why did you switch to look for something? It sounds like you.
Yeah.
Hey. It sounds like you then were like, this isn't it. Is that kind of what you were thinking? Is that?
Yeah, it got like way worse.
Okay, so it started getting worse.
Yeah, his reaction toward other dogs just skyrocketed.
Okay, and so you see it get worse, so you're like, okay, obviously this isn't working.
Right.
And so the next person you go to.
So the next couple people I went to, they were still like balance trainers, so they had the treats and all of that.
But they incorporated some kind of discipline.
Yeah. So the first thing they did is they put him on a prong collar, and then they said, okay, we'll walk dogs by him, and then we'll prong him every time he reacts. And he would still like escalate through the correction, so I'd be like choking him out all the way through there, and then they'd be like, okay, that's good, that's all you need. And I thought, I feel like this is not what it is.
It's not addressing the real issue.
Yeah, he's not learning from it, and eventually he's just going to be the same. Because I had another dog before, and that was kind of the thing that we did was like, we didn't use a prong collar, we used like a soft like choke or whatever.
Yeah, the slip lead or whatever. Yeah.
But she was the exact same way. Like she never got better. She was around dogs, so she eventually got better, but we never fixed the issue or got to what was going on.
Yeah. And so the next people were kind of in the same vein, is what it sounds like, that you used. They kind of had a similar strategy.
Yeah, well, they said, well, he's kind of like beyond treats and positive at this point. Yeah. So let's go
to the discipline using prong collars, that kind of thing.
Right.
And then what you saw was kind of similar, wasn't working.
Right. Yeah.
Escalating. was he still redirecting and biting at you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then what was the next step after that?
So the next step after that was like, I thought, okay, well, I can't, obviously I don't know what I'm doing, so I need to just give him to somebody else who does. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I called the shelter. Yeah. I was like, well, my what I asked them was, because I was gonna just say, hey, I should just give him to them, but I ended up asking, I was like, hey, do you know a dog trainer? Mm-hmm. Because if somebody works with shelter dogs, they probably know a little bit, and that was when
with a problem, a big problem. Because usually, isn't that what we think of the shelters? That's the place that the dogs that just aren't able to be dealt with.
They all go there. Yeah,
they all go there. Yeah, right. And so this is where you ended up hearing about me is through the shelter, right?
Yes.
And then do you remember when you first called and everything like that, and kind of a little bit of what we initially talked about in the game plan moving forward?
Like for the phone call, or when the
like when you first called, like do you remember kind of what you were expressing to me, and then kind of a little bit of what I said back to you? Yeah,
so I was saying basically, I know that what he's doing, like he needs to be disciplined or help through it, but I don't know how to do that. And then I remember you saying, was like, hey, yeah, these issues with prong collar or trying to just fix the issue isn't going to fix it. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that is so true, because there's underlying something. Yeah, yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, I felt like you kind of knew a little bit what I was coming from. Yeah. And you knew what,
do you find that what I was saying was different than what you had been hearing?
Yes.
And I'm sure that was very helpful to the journey too, of like, okay, this is different. Right. So here's an option, because I've tried these options and this doesn't sound like these options. Right. And I was actually talking against a lot of what was recommended, right?
Right.
And so I remember us then looking at scheduling our first meeting.
Yes.
And do you remember that?
The first meeting? Mm-hmm. Yeah, really well. Because the first thing I thought was interesting was we sat down and we just talked. Yeah. And I was like, oh, we're not just gonna go straight into training or evaluating. And hi, Thea. Good. How are you doing? No, you're good.
Okay, so our first meeting.
Yes.
You say you remember it well.
Yes.
And so I would like to hear your perspective and what you recall from that.
So I remember it was, the big thing was like you had a tennis ball, mm-hmm. and you said, okay, so you've kind of trained him to be like super hyped, because when we first went into the shelter, he was like hiding behind chairs, super nervous, and I was like, oh, this poor dog, kind of, and petting him and like, it's okay, buddy. Yeah. And then you bring out a tennis ball and he like perks up. Yeah. And and then you tossed it and he went to chase it and you disciplined him for it. Yep. And I was like so offended. I was like, what? I was like, you can't just set him up for fail. That's horrible, because I had, been told you don't never set your dog up for fail. You go really slow. Yeah. But it was crazy because immediately after that, we just went out with, I think the cats were first. Yeah. And we just like walked into the room, or there's cats in the hallway. We just walked through them.
Yep.
He ignored them.
Yep.
And then the next couple of dogs that you brought up, you know, like he was nervous, so he wasn't interacting because that's who he was. Like he was full of anxiety, but he wasn't like chewing up things, redirecting, biting. He was just totally, you know, not calm, but he hadn't like.
Yeah, because I remember like he's an insecure dog.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so even when you were saying about the sheep being young, he still is a little nervous about it all, right?
Yeah. Well,
and,
he would go into him, react, and make him crash. Like he would crash.
Yeah. And so he had this insecurity about him. He gets this environment and lifestyle radically changes, right? And the way you have to the way you start living with him, way different, right?
Yeah.
And so with you and what were experiencing, he was being, you know, some people will say reactive, but aggressive towards dogs, towards cats, and then even redirecting and biting you if you look to interfere with that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so then when he comes into the shelter, and it's now a different environment. We addressed him for, you know, chasing the ball, right? Because him chasing the ball is a predatory thing.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at what issue is he having? Well, he's being predatory and chasing after the cat. He's moving forward towards the stimulant, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, we might as well start with the ball, because if we can't reach him and get him to hear us with this, we definitely don't want to be, you know, putting him with dogs yet, right? So then we put him in that environment with, man, I think that at the time there was at least 20 dogs.
Something like that.
There's a lot, right?
There's a lot of dogs.
And so he comes, we bring him in, and instead of this dog that's reacting, being aggressive towards these things, he's hiding. Yeah. Right? Complete opposite. And this is where I'm interested in, how did that make you feel when you first started seeing that, where he's hiding now?
I was kind of shocked. I was really shocked because I'd never seen him just be hiding and scared. I was like, oh shoot, this is going to be easier than I thought it was. Like for you, maybe not. I didn't know. Well, for me, I thought at the time, I was like, oh, maybe this is easier than I thought it was. Yeah. Until I realized that it was both of us like playing onto each other.
Yeah, your relationship was the huge problem in this equation.
Exactly. Right? Yeah.
And so when you first see him like this, did you have concern that he was scared, and you're like, because
no, because we had seen like other dogs that you have on the farm that are like that. They usually end up like coming out of their shell and being okay and whatever.
They just need some time.
Yeah, they just need to adjust.
So yeah, because that's usually where I find a lot of people will get concerned, and they go, "This isn't right for my dog. He's scared," because they're used to this dog that's outgoing. You know, they're very bold, and it's like, but this is, you're having aggression problems. Yes. And so with you, they light up and they're forward, and they have this confidence about them, but it's really underneath is this fear, this insecurity, that, you know, and it's, then they're confident with that fear, which then you get some pretty intense aggression. Yeah. You know, and you, well, at least you can. And so he's hiding, right? And I instructed you like to not pet him. Yeah. Don't comfort him. Our job is just to make sure he is safe. Right? Yeah. And so we just made sure that, hey, you can't go at dogs, right? And we're gonna make sure that you don't have any dogs come at you, and we're gonna keep you safe. And so as we move through, how did how did that experience unfold from your memory?
So as we were moving through, he sat in the corner and just like shook
Yeah.
the whole time. Like he was scared, he was shut down. And he would, like when other dogs would come up to smell him, he'd growl at them. I think he snapped at somebody.
Yeah.
Just real quick. And I was kind of surprised that we didn't like do anything with that. You're just like, nah, he's, just
Communicating.
Yeah, he's just communicating.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's not like terrible.
Yeah. Like, this is where sometimes I find that we have this idea in our head.
Yeah.
And we're not understanding what's actually happening. We see the growling, the snap, and it produces this fear in us. Oh no.
Yeah.
Right? And we feel like we got to do something about it. And sometimes we need to insert ourselves into this. But what I was seeing is a dog that wasn't proactively trying to attack dogs.
No.
He was just saying, I'm uncomfortable. Hey, that's my boundary.
Yeah.
Kind of like you when you first got here today. The pack comes up. You
All
start
the
setting your
dogs.
boundary. You feel a little like your personal space is being invaded, right?
Yes.
And so this is a normal thing. But yeah, I allow him to communicate and express himself, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm looking at is, does he eventually start to open up, like you said on what you've seen on the farm, where these dogs can start to open up? Well, does he start to open up, or is he always staying in this spot where he never wants to be checked out? And he's like, don't come near me.
Yeah.
Then this is where I'm going to probably have to start inserting myself and say, hey, you chill out, and you need to allow this dog to smell you.
Yeah.
So that he can then experience something new and see that he's safe, and then we're addressing this underlying fear of his. Oh my gosh, I didn't have to snap and do this, and I was still okay. And this guy has my back.
Yeah.
He's protecting me.
Yeah.
Right? So as we continue, from my memory, we started with like one dog, and then we released another dog and another dog, and eventually we had all the shelter dogs out with your dog.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what else do you remember from this first meeting? Anything else?
Not really. I think it was kind of quick. Our first session was kind of quick.
Yeah, I think it was like an hour or under.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, because like for me, it was just like, we're gonna check him out.
Yeah.
We're gonna put him through this, and then we go, look, he's not doing these things because he's feeling different, because different environment, me, and it shifts.
Yeah.
And so when we get done with this meeting, I give you some instructions of saying, hey, you need to stop doing these things, you need to start doing these things. And I know that your journey has been challenging, because it's not about like, what word do I say and what do I do? It's more about who we are, right? And how we go about life and how we handle things, how we show up. Yeah. And then you have a history with him. Yeah. Right? Yeah. He knows you, and then you're trying to make these changes, and there's this it's like a power struggle almost going on, where he doesn't feel like you have his back. Yeah. He feels like you're also coming at him, a problem. Yeah. Right? And so it's been a journey to shift this, right? Yeah. And so when you would go away, we would talk, you'd say, oh man, I'm having a hard time with this and that, right? Yeah. And then we would meet up, and we would go into those exact same situations. And he'd be fine. He'd be fine.
And it was infuriating, because I'd be like, well, then.
You're like, what is going on,
I'm
right?
like, oh, it's just me. I don't know what to do.
You're like, ah. And then I was like trying to explain, and you're like, I just don't get it.
Yeah,
like,
I did.
I don't get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm doing that. And I'm like, Bethany, like.
It's easier than you're making it.
It's easier than you're making it seem. It's just your mind is having a hard time going there, because it's not it's hard to sometimes see how we are,
Yes.
right?
I think that was a big thing.
Like, it's hard to see that.
Yeah.
And so I kept trying to find all these different ways to say things, right? Like,
Yeah.
what about this and what about that? And so this happened for a while. Like, you'd be struggling, and then I would come in. Like, I remember coming into your house because the issue with the cat.
Yeah.
Come in, and then he's chilling off.
Didn't even try, like, did nothing.
Yeah, and then I leave, and then it's like he's
Chaos.
doing it again,
Yeah.
right? And so this is why, to me, it's like it's the relationship. This is why I was saying that the things that you were being told isn't it.
Right.
It's not deep enough. It has to do with. I mean, some of it has to do with the things that they were actually telling you are exacerbating and feeding the issue.
Right.
And then you're connected onto that and all that. It's like you just have this history.
Yeah.
I don't have the same history
Right.
that you have with him. So then our relationship's different. He feels different with me.
Yeah.
Compared to you. And so I give you credit all the time of sticking with it, because like
There were times.
because it's really, really challenging. Because
Yeah.
I'm saying, Bethany, you have to change as a person.
Yeah.
You have to change.
Yeah.
And I started trying to show you outside of your dog where these same issues are showing up, because
Right.
once we keep meeting, like, we get more and more familiar with one another, and I started saying, look, Bethany, your boundaries here, and
Yeah.
and then this is what then starts to happen here, and now you got to unravel this thing that you've created.
Yeah.
And when you start to maybe act differently, I mean, I think as people, we have these experiences where we go, you know what? I'm no longer going to do X. And so then we stop doing X, and then everyone around us might start having adverse reactions to that.
Yeah.
Oh, you've changed. I don't get why you're like this now.
Yeah.
Right? And it can be very hard. And so we might go back to doing X again, because everyone around us is putting this pressure on us,
Right.
to make us back to what they're comfortable with, how they know our relationship.
Yeah.
You know? And so when you start to look at understanding and everything, you were saying, very frustrating, right? Like, and I remember you just being so frustrated.
Yeah.
And I said, Bethany, just chill. Like,
Yeah.
like you're and I relate a lot with you. Like, you want this so bad,
Yes.
and you want it now. Like, and
Want
it's
it
like,
now, yeah.
You just gotta ease up and just see this process of just. It's like slow and steady wins the race.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so we started trying to break it down into smaller and smaller increments, you know, because I think
Yeah.
at first it was just
Everything.
it was overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know, and so then I said, stop doing this, stop doing that, stop going out here, stop doing
Yeah.
and this.
Yeah.
Right?
Just this.
Just this.
Just focus at home.
Yeah, let's get this part down, and
Yeah.
so building up your okay, I'm starting to get this aspect, right?
Yeah, and I think as soon as we started, you know, if we just focused on like do these things at home or live this way at home, it was kind of like when we'd go out or when I'd be like, well, what about having to go out? You're just like, okay, but like just live at home like this, and then when things happen, deal with it. And it was literally the hardest thing to try to figure out what you were doing.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Even though you kept telling me, I was like, what the heck what are you getting at? Where are we going with this?
Yeah.
And now looking back on it, I see we had to like rebuild the whole relationship because I wasn't seeing what he was doing and interpreting like what he was doing. I would see some things and I'd be like, oh, you should stop that, when he was just being himself. And I'd see other things like, oh, he's just whatever, when I should have stopped it. So
exactly.
it was like I just didn't understand.
It's just like even with people.
Yeah.
Like if we have a misunderstanding, there's a chance that there's gonna be conflict.
Right.
You know, if we're missing each other.
Yeah.
You know, and this is why it's like I just remember you just being like, but what about this and this and that? And I'm like, stop.
Just stop doing
stop.
that.
Just stop.
Yeah.
Like, and you're like, but this, and it's just like, and this is the thing is that you're fighting against these things because of who you are and how you feel like you need to do things and what you're like, what's stressing you out. And and I have to try to guide you through this of like, look, I get it, but you got to stop that and you got to start this, and it's uncomfortable, but change is uncomfortable, and so you started staying with it. And I think, man, like, I think one of the, and let me know if I'm right, but I think one of the reasons you stayed with it is just because when we'd meet up, it was like you saw the dog that you were looking for, where he's playing with dogs and he's having a good time, and we can go out and walk the trails and come across dogs and people and all that. Right?
Yeah, and he was like exactly the type of dog. I was like, okay, so I know that
he can do these things.
Yeah, I know that it's him.
But why isn't he doing it with you? Right?
Yeah,
and this is why it's like, so obviously it isn't him.
Right.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that you stayed with it because you saw that piece. I think that like there's no way you would have stayed with it if it wasn't obviously different with me. You would have just been like, I got to give him back. I got to give up on this dog. Like I went to multiple trainers. Mm-hmm. Nothing's worked. I've given it my all. Yeah. And this just isn't working. Right. And I gotta accept that this isn't it. Yeah. And so when you keep with it, I feel like it was a while before you had a big like breakthrough. Yeah. And it was probably like almost like a year and a couple months. Yeah. Before I was like, oh, I think this is it. Yeah. And it wasn't like a big one. It was just kind of like, oh, try this. I think it was because like I had been trying so much to like control. And then when I just kind of was like, trust him a little bit more.
Yeah, trust him. And then I think I just took a step back, and I remember actually, because we were coming out of the car back into the house, and we have neighbors with dogs and stuff, and they had their dogs out, and so he went, crazy and was barking and whatever. And I remember just like, I was trying to, discipline him or calm him down or anything. Nothing was working. And so I remember just like taking a step back and thinking, what is he actually doing then? Yeah. And he stopped. He just like calmed himself down. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I'm just like making it worse. Yeah. Because he just like calmed himself down. The other dogs were out. They were still running around. He literally calmed himself down and then hid under the car. Yeah. And I was like, oh, he's just anxious. And so from that point on, I think I was just, I could give him an initial correction, or I could, whatever. But if I didn't get worked up and I just took it like we're having a discussion, he's just expressing what he's feeling and didn't take it so personally and didn't say like, you need to stop.
He's a bad dog.
Yeah, my neighbors hate me, I'm so sorry.
I think that was the biggest thing for you was what other people were thinking of you about this situation. Yeah. Because I remember asking you, so Bethany, if you were out and about and another dog shows up, how would you go about? And it's like you would be like, oh well, it wouldn't be that big a deal. Yeah. But I said, what if a person was there though? Yeah. And then you go, oh, how like it changed it. It's a lot more stressful for you, right? Yeah. And this is why I remember going out to like Good Dog and just telling you like you just need to trust him. And if you need to handle something, you got to handle something. Right. But you got to start trusting. And, and this is what, you're describing. You realize I had to step back a bit, Yeah. And realize that, what's going on with him. Mm-hmm. And so I think that over time you're becoming better and better at reading that what's actually going on with him, and how to navigate. But there's still a long road ahead because it's not easy. It's
No,
not easy.
no.
It's not easy because like we have to develop as a person. We have to develop our understanding and our skill. Like it's growth, and that often takes time. It takes making mistakes. It's all of that, right?
Yeah.
And so you have this moment of you go, oh my gosh, stepping back is. It was like, and this is why I say I think it is a big breakthrough. You might not feel like it was this big breakthrough, but I do because I've seen so many people that they just have a hard time stepping out of what they're doing.
Yeah.
They just feel so compelled that they got to do it,
Yeah.
And so you had that moment where there was this separation. And you go, oh my gosh, I'm taking things so personally.
Yeah.
And then I'm putting it on to him.
Yeah.
And it exacerbates the situation.
Like both of us being like anxious, obsessive, or just like.
Yeah. That's why it's like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you just need to chill. Just breathe, calm down, like, and be more smooth. And this is what I'm always reminding you of because, I mean, it almost seems like it's just this is genetically who you are. Like you're a very kind of high-strung person, and that's where I think with Tim, I think he's helping you calm down.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Like he is actually, I think he's not as high-strung as I am, honestly. Because he's actually the most chill, like, border collie sheepdog I've ever met.
He's just chilling over there right now.
Yeah, he's very chill.
Yeah, I find that he's determined for sure. Like when he's definitely a determined dog, but he's laid back. He's not this like real like crazy dog,
Yeah, no.
He's a good dog.
He's not the dog that goes like whipping around the house.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And so I just think that this expectation and this like these fears, these anxieties, these worries that you had, and then you're trying to deal with that through being like you're causing the problem,
Yeah.
and it's like you need to understand this better so that you can calm yourself down. You can find strategies that actually help you out.
Yeah.
And so when you start to move through this journey, lots and lots of challenges.
Yeah.
And did you find that sometimes it was really hard to, and I'm sure it was, but hear what I was telling you, about yourself, about like how I perceived you?
I didn't get it. like I was trying to understand what you were saying, but I didn't necessarily understand, like you have a hard time putting up boundaries. I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's not, you don't get it because like this, that, and the other thing, X, Y, and Z. And then it was like, oh no, actually you have a hard time putting up boundaries and you need to like, there's no X, Y, and Z in that. There's a put up boundaries.
And you fought me on that, right? You're like, no, you don't understand. And I'm like, Bethany, I do understand. Like, and then eventually you started realizing like, oh yeah, like boundaries don't necessarily always mean just directly telling people, hey, sometimes it's like realizing like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't do that right now. Yeah. Right? It's like setting limits on things. Like, oh, I probably shouldn't act like this. I probably, so.
Like, what are you doing? It was more like, what are you doing and why? And I never really thought about what I did and why I did it.
You just have been
reacting. I just react, Yeah,
you've just been reacting. And this is why this thing starts to do. And then people tell you to do this. And then you're just like, you're just doing it. And this is what, even with me, like, I say, hey, do this. And then I have to start helping you understand, like, not all the time, not like this, right?
Yeah.
Because you just start applying things, like, because of this, I think, underlying angst. And then the needing more experiences, So this is where I find that it's very important that people can make mistakes and it's not perfect, But we just need to stay with it. I find that, you know, sometimes when I'm telling people like over and over the same thing, they get frustrated because they don't feel like I'm getting it. I'm not listening. I don't understand where they're coming from.
Right.
And this is what it sounds like you were kind of thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like, and feeling. And but ultimately you start to understand, oh, no, he has been listening. I just haven't been able to connect and understand what he's saying. Now,
it took a lot of just staying with it to be able to because I think, you know, conceptually I understood what you were saying, but I didn't understand it like, you know, at a deeper level. And it took like years of trying to, you know, of just going through stuff and living through stuff and calming yourself down. And
and that's why I wanted to, you know, sit down with you today. And I know that you got to get back to work, but maybe we can continue this dialogue further at another time. But I just know that a lot of people, they'll find this helpful, and then I think that people that, you know, might run into, and it happens all the time, that run into this feeling of like, you're not understanding, you're not listening to me, like, why do you keep telling me that? Like, that they'll actually stay with it and start to reflect more on what I'm saying, you know. And this is what I appreciated about you, is that, I mean, you would explain, you know, or say your opinion on like, hey, well, this is why I don't agree with you, this is why, you know, and so we would have those dialogues back and forth, and then we would just keep moving, and eventually it started clicking, you know. And so now we're looking at furthering your knowledge and your skills by having you more a part of getting him and yourself around dogs, so he understands how you are, and you can handle these things, so he feels safe with you, right? And that you guys can build the trust in each other in your relationship, right?
Yeah, that's a big thing.
And so, do you have any last things that you want to say before you got to get going here?
No, I think. Cool.
Well, I really appreciate the time, and like I said, we might do a part 2, but I do think that this was awesome, and I look forward to starting with you and Tim in the pack education, because I think that's going to really start to take it to the next level, because he's been coming to daycare and he does well, you know, but I know that with you, we want to continue to smooth that thing out, so it's like what you see here, right?
That would be great.
Yeah.
That would be great.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.